Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the knotted bow headband. So let's get started. So this is a relatively simple design and a simple pattern to work. It only involves working back and forth in rows. And this is kind of a custom design it the way you want it type of pattern. What it is this is a design so you can use any yarn weight that you want, and you can make the length custom fit so that, it'll fit your head comfortably with whatever yarn, with whatever needle you're using, whatever your gauge may be with that yarn. It will still fit correctly and give you the look that you want. So I have some samples here. These top two, the beige and the white, are worked in a fingering weight yarn. This is cotton fingering weight yarn, Knit Picks Comfy. And these two right here are worked in sport weight yarn. This one is worked in bulky weight yarn. And when you do a thick yarn like this, then you get more of a earwarmer headband with a big giant bow on it. And if you like chunky earwarmers with giant bows, then this one might be for you. But all of this is the same exact pattern. And the pattern gives you all the instructions to make it the correct length, the correct width, and you can even adjust the width. According to the instructions in the pattern, you can make it wider, the full width, or a little bit narrower than that full width. So these two are the full width, worked in fingering. This is the full width, worked in sport. This one is a little bit narrower. The regular width is 13 stitches wide. This one is 11 stitches wide. This one is also 11 stitches wide, but because it's in the bulky yarn, it's still pretty wide. So if I had made it 13 stitches wide, it would have been about that wide. So if you're going to do a fall or winter earwarmer type, then I would recommend a worsted or a bulky. Particularly bulky is good for keeping warm. These other smaller weight ones are more for spring and summer when you just want an accessory and not necessarily something you want to keep your head warm. So as you can see here, the thicker the yarn, even though these are all made the same length for the same head circumference, the thicker the yarn you use, the wider your headband is and the bigger the bow. So these have kind of a smaller bow. These have a slightly larger bow, and the bulky one has a giant bow. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a worsted one, which would be in between the sport and the bulky. DK weight will also work for this, but I'm going to do worsted right now, mainly because you can see it a little easier on the camera because it's thicker and bulkier. So for this project, you're going to need the yarn of your choice. You can choose absolutely any yarn you like. You're going to choose a needle that is appropriate for the thickness of the yarn you're using. I am using a worsted weight yarn, so I'm going to use a size H 5mm crochet hook. The label will list a recommended hook size range for the yarn. This one says I through K, but I'm doing H just because I like it a little bit tighter. And by the way, when you do it a little bit tighter, relative to the yarn thickness, of course, but when you do a lower hook size or smaller hook size for the yarn that you're using, it will create a slightly denser structured fabric. A larger hook will give you a kind of loose floppy type of fabric like this one. This was fingering weight and I did a D hook with it, and it's a little floppier, whereas if you do a little bit smaller hook compared to the size of your yarn, smaller hook to yarn ratio, you get a little bit stiffer, which can be helpful if you want the bow to lay straight and flat all the time. So you're also going to need a pair of scissors for trimming yarn. You're going to need a measuring tape. You're going to need a yarn needle or a blunt tapestry needle. And you're going to need some stitch markers. Now I like the locking kind. You can use the split ring kind if you prefer. Or if you don't have stitch markers, you can also use safety pins. Now what you do when we finish this up, I'm explaining this ahead of time so that you understand why you might need this extra supply that I'm not showing here. When we finish up the headband, the last thing that we do is we take the two ends, here, these are the ends, we tie them in a double knot like this. And to do that and get it to the right head circumference, you either need to be tying it around the person's head. And you know, you want it to be a little bit snug so that it'll actually stay on. But if you can't tie it around the person's head, and that is not always possible, so what you can do is get a piece of cardboard, sturdy cardboard, that is half as wide as the recipient's head circumference, or something similar. It has, you know, a book, anything that is the correct width, that's going to hold up when you kind of stretch this a little bit around it. And then you can use that to tie the headband around so that the ends are already together and you can make sure that it is the right size. So now we have all our supplies, we can get started with the crochet. So we're going to start by working the first section, which is the bow section. We're going to start by chaining 4. We're going to work 4 double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. So here's 1, 2, 3, there's the 4th one, which is the very first one we did. Going to work 4 double crochet all in that one spot. And then I'm going to pull on that little tail to tighten it up so we don't have a little hole there. So that is row 1. Now for row 2, we're going to chain 3 and turn. We're going to work a half double crochet in the same stitch. So the stitch that chain is coming out of is the same stitch. We're going to work a half double crochet there. We're going to half double crochet in each stitch across until we get to the beginning chain space from the row below, which is right here. That's that chain 3, and in this pattern and in pretty much all my patterns, the beginning chain space always counts as a stitch. So what we're going to do is, now that we've gotten to that beginning chain space, we're going to work a half double crochet and a double crochet in the top of that. So that is row 2. Row 3 is to repeat row 2. So we're again going to chain 3 and turn, work a half double crochet in the same stitch, half double crochet in each of those stitches across until we get to that beginning chain space from the row below. Then we're going to work a half double crochet and a double crochet into that space. So now we're going to work row 4, which is very simple. We're going to chain 2 and turn. We're not going to work into the same stitch, which is the stitch that the chain's coming out of. We're going to work into the next one. So we're going to half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across until we get to that beginning chain space from the row below, which is right here. Then we're going to half double crochet in the top of that beginning chain space from the row below. So that's row 4. Row 5 and 6 is to repeat rows 3 and 4. All right, so this is the first part of our bow. This is the part that widens from the tip. Now we're going to decrease it down, narrow it down. So we're going to work row 7, which is chain 2 and turn. We're going to work a half double crochet 2 together. So we're going to yarn over, insert the hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, but instead of finishing this the way we'd normally finish a half double crochet by yarning over and pulling through all those loops, we're going to yarn over and insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So we now have 5 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 5. So now we're going to half double crochet in each of the stitches across until we get to the last 2 stitches, which is the last regular stitch and the beginning chain space. So here we go. I've got a beginning chain space and 1 regular stitch left. I'm going to half double crochet those 2 together. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into the half double crochet from the row below, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I'm going to yarn over, insert into the top of that beginning chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. So that's row 7. Row 8 is to repeat row 4, which is chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across until we get to that beginning chain space, and half double crochet in the top of the beginning chain space from the row below. So now we're going to work row 9, which is to repeat row 7, chain 2, turn. We're going to half double crochet 2 together. We're going to half double crochet across till the last 2 stitches, which is the last regular stitch and that beginning chain space. And then we're going to half double crochet those 2 together. So that is row 9. That is the actual bow part. Now this next little bit is going to be the part where that it's tied in a knot. So this part is a little narrower. So for rows 10 to 15, we're going to repeat row 4, which is again chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across till we get to that beginning chain space from the row below, and half double crochet in the beginning chain space from the row below. So I'm going to continue repeating that same row for rows 11 to 15. Alright, so there's that 15th row. That is the first bow section. So what we're going to do is we are going to mark where this section ends by taking a stitch marker or safety pin if you don't have a stitch marker, and we're going to mark the end of that 15th row. So we know when we're measuring this later to get the size right, we know that this part is not included in the length of the headband part because this is just the bow. This is the part that gets tied in the knot and the little ends of the bow that make that bow shape. So now that we have finished our bow section and marked where the end of it is, I'm going to show you on this one. This one has not been tied together yet. So I'm going to show you right here. This is what we've got here. This is the first bow section. And now we're going to work this increase section right here. So this increases the width of the headband. Again, if you don't want to increase it to its full width, then the pattern does give instructions for which rows to omit or skip to increase it a little bit, but just not as much as the entire 13 stitches wide that it's going to be once we increase it to the full width. So the stitch marker here will help us know where the end of that bow section is, so we know not to include this in our measurement of the length, because this part is just for decoration. It's just where you tie it in a knot and have the little bow part sticking out. But this is where the part that actually goes around the head starts. So let's work that increase section. So I'm going to start by working row 16, which is to chain 2 and turn. I'm going to half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across until I get to that beginning chain space from the row below. And I'm going to work a half double crochet and a double crochet in the top of that beginning chain space. So that's row 16. Now row 17 and 18 is to repeat row 16. So again, I'm going to chain 2 and turn, half double crochet in the next stitch, half double crochet across to that beginning chain space from the row below, and then I'm going to half double crochet and double crochet into that beginning chain space. So again, I'm going to repeat it, chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across to that beginning chain space from the row below. And then I'm going to work a half double crochet and a double crochet into that space. So that's the first kind of step of our increase section. If you want to stop here and not make it any wider, then you can skip to the straight section. Don't work the rest of the increase section. And the pattern also tells you which decrease rows in the decrease section you're going to skip if you stop increasing here. So now we're going to work rows 19 and 20, which is to repeat row 4, which is chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across to that beginning chain space from the row below, and then half double crochet in the beginning chain space from the row below. So that was row 19, and I'm going to do it again for row 20. And then for row 21, we're going to repeat row 16, which adds a stitch. So I'm going to chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across to that beginning chain space from the row below. And I'm going to half double crochet and double crochet into that chain space. So if you want to stop here and stop increasing it at this point, the pattern gives instructions for how to do that. So for row 22 to 24 and for row 25 to 27, the pattern will tell you to repeat rows 19 through 21. So I'm just going to repeat that through row 27, which is the last 3 rows that we just did. I'm going to repeat it 2 more times. So that is my 27th row. That is the end of the increase section. I'm going to place another stitch marker at the end of this row to mark the end of the increase section, so that we know we are measuring properly. So now we're going to measure the increase section. So what we need to do is we need to measure this with the crochet stretched. And what this does is this makes the headband the correct length so that it is just a little bit smaller than the head, so that it can stretch to comfortably stay on the head and not be, not be too tight, but be just snug enough that it doesn't just fall off. So I have my measuring tape here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the length of the increase section. So if this is 0, there's my marker for the end of the bow section. And here is the edge of my increase section right here. So if I were to measure this unstretched, it measures about 4 1/4 inches. But if I stretch it like that, I'm getting about 5 inches. So what you're going to do is you're going to stretch the increase section. You don't want to totally stretch it to its full capacity, but stretch it some, measure that, and then you're going to take that measurement. I got 5 inches. You're going to double it, which would be 10 inches. So what you're going to do is you're going to subtract that number from the total head circumference. So what we're doing is we're accounting for the length of the first increase section right here, and we're accounting for the length of this decrease section. So what we do is, because, let's pretend this was the one that I'm making right now. If each of these sections is 5 inches long, and as long as you follow the instructions correctly, they will both be the same length, then what we're getting is we want the measurement for how long this straight section should be in the middle. So I'm going to take that 5 inches, that's my increase section. The decrease section will be the same length, so that's 10 inches. I've doubled the measurement to get 10 inches. That's how long my increase section and my decrease section will be when put together. So now I'm going to take that number and subtract it from the head circumference. So I'm making this for a 21-inch head circumference. So I'm going to remove 10 inches. So that means that my straight section should be 11 inches long. And again, when I say it should be 11 inches long, that is when stretched. And how long that should be will always depend on what size you're making, how long you want it to be, the yarn you're using, your gauge, all of that. So this is why it's custom. So it's going to be the right fit no matter what your yarn is, what your gauge is, etc. So now we're going to work the straight section. So for the straight section, we're just going to work row 28, which is repeat row 4, chain 2 and turn. We're going to half double crochet in the next stitch and in each of the next stitches across until we get to that beginning chain space from the row below. And then we're going to half double crochet in the top of that beginning chain space from the row below. So that's the row that we're going to be repeating for the entire straight section. So we're going to repeat it until the measurement from the beginning of the straight section, which is the end of the increase section. So we're only measuring from here, not from here. We're going to be measuring from here until our edge, wherever our edge is. That should be the correct number, the correct length. So I'm going for 11 inches for my straight section. So when I stretch it, it should measure 11 inches from here to the edge of my, where my top edge of the crochet is going to be. So I'm going to keep repeating this row until it's long enough. So that is my straight section. It is finished. This is the straight section on the already crocheted one. So you can see when you do the smaller yarn and a smaller needle, your increase section is a lot shorter. So you need a longer straight section to get the same overall head circumference that you would get out of the larger yarn. So now we're going to work this decrease section right here. And before we do that, again, we're going to place a marker at the end of this row. I'm going to go ahead and place it at the beginning of the row, just because I want all my markers on the same long side, but you don't have to do that. You can place it at the end of the row as long as it's just on this row. So now we're going to work this decrease section. So for row 29, we're going to chain 2 and turn. We're going to half double crochet in the next stitch and half double crochet across to the last stitch and the beginning chain space from the row below. So we should only have one more regular stitch and that beginning chain space left. So here we go. There's the last stitch, there's the beginning chain space. So now we're going to half double crochet 2 together into that last stitch and into the top of the beginning chain space. So that's row 29. For rows 30 to 31, we're going to repeat row 4, which is chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across. And then we're going to half double crochet into the beginning chain space from the row below. And if in your increase section you followed the instructions to only increase to a certain point and not increase to the full width, then the instructions will tell you which decrease rows to omit to make it balance on this end. So that was row 30. For row 31, I'm going to do the same thing, chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across. And then we're going to half double crochet into that beginning chain space from the row below. All right, so that is rows 29 to 31, and we're going to repeat for rows 32 to 34, and for rows 35 to 37, we're going to repeat rows 29 to 31. So we're going to be working those 3 rows 2 more times. All right, so that is the end of my row 37. So now for rows 38 to 40, we're going to repeat row 29 again, which is again chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across to the last 2 stitches, which is the last regular stitch and that beginning chain space. And then we're going to half double crochet those 2 stitches together. So I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. All right, so now we are back down to 7 stitches wide. So that is the end of our decrease section. So here's what this decrease section looks like. And we're going to place another marker on the last decrease row, and again I'm doing it at the beginning of the row just because I can have all the markers on the same long side. So here's our decrease section on this one, and here's our decrease section on this one, and now as you can see, all we have left is the second bow section. So this one is just the reverse of the first bow section. So for rows 41 to 46, we're going to repeat row 4 by chaining 2, turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each across to that beginning chain space, and half double crochet in the top of the beginning chain space. So that was the first one, and it's a total of 6 rows, so I'm going to do 5 more. Alright, so that is row 46. So for rows 47 to 53, we're going to repeat rows 3 to 9. So for row 3, I'm going to chain 3 and turn, half double crochet in the same stitch, and in each stitch across until we get to that beginning chain space. And I'm going to half double crochet and double crochet into that beginning chain space. I'm going to chain 2 and turn for row 4, half double crochet in the next stitch, each stitch across till we get to the beginning chain space, and half double crochet in the beginning chain space. For row 5 and 6, we're going to do the same thing, chain 3 and turn, half double crochet in the same stitch, and in each stitch across until we get to that beginning chain space. Then we're going to half double crochet and double crochet in the beginning chain space, and again we're going to chain 2 and turn, half double crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch across, and then we're going to work another half double crochet into the top of that beginning chain space from the row below. So that's the 6th row. Now for row 7, we're going to chain 2 and turn, half double crochet 2 together. Then we're going to half double crochet in each stitch across until we get to the last 2 stitches, which is the last regular stitch and the beginning chain space. So that's all I've got left, that last stitch and the beginning chain space. I'm going to half double crochet those 2 together. So that's row 7. For row 8, we're going to chain 2 and turn and repeat row 4. And then for row 9, we're going to repeat row 7. Alright, so that is the 53rd row, which is repeating row 9. So now we're going to work row 7 again for row 54. So we're going to again chain 2 and turn, half double crochet 2 together, half double crochet in each stitch across until we get to the last 2, which is that last regular stitch and the beginning chain space, and then half double crochet those 2 together. So we have 1 row left, and it is pretty simple. For row 55, we're going to chain 2 and turn, and then we're going to double crochet 4 together. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops as if we were doing a double crochet. If we were going to finish the double crochet, we would yarn over and pull through 2 loops again, but we're not going to do that. We've got half a double crochet here, not a half double crochet, but part of a double crochet. Again, we're going to yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So now we've got 3 partial double crochets on the hook. Yarn over, insert into the top of that beginning chain space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So we've got, here's the chain 2 that we did at the beginning. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 partial double crochets. They're not finished yet. So now we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook. And we're going to kind of tighten that a little bit. So that's the end of the bow. We're going to cut the yarn, and we're going to tie off, and now we can weave in the ends on both of those bow sections. So instead of tying my headband around a piece of cardboard, I'm going to show you how I'm going to tie it on this styrofoam wig stand head. This is like for, you know, displaying hats and stuff. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take all the stitch markers off of the headband, and I'm going to stand up the styrofoam head, and I'm going to bring the headband around the back of the neck to the top here. And I'm going to kind of pull on it so that these two narrow sections right here are overlapping, and I'm going to tie that in a single knot and tighten it, and then I'm going to tie it in a second knot to make it a double knot. And you want to pull the knot as tight as you can because that will make it less bulky. So there is our finished bow. You can take it off of the stand now. So I tied mine around the wig stand. If you want to tie it around a piece of cardboard, then you can do that. Or if you want to actually tie it around your head, you can also do that as well. So then once you take it off of whatever you tied it around, you can just kind of tweak it, adjust it, and tug on both sides of the knot to make sure that it is secure and it is tightened, because if it's tightened, then it's not going to be as bulky. It takes some of the thickness out of the knot when you pull it tight. So if you want to get the free written pattern for this project, it is available on my blog. Just check the link in the description box below, and it gives all the instructions on how to customize it and make it just the way you want it for the yarn you want to use. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like this project, please give it a thumbs up. If you make it, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.